Thank you, Debbie. And I'm going to present from up here because they're recording through this laptop. So I'm not going to use a mic. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So I am Gary Schirmacher. I work for Experient. We're a Maritz travel company. I've gotten involved with the shared economy probably back as early as 2013. And just a little bit about myself. One of the responsibilities I have is overseeing our industry presence and strategic development. So always looking for ways to engage new technology, new companies, new thoughts, and new actions in terms of our company and what we do for our customers. I live in Colorado, and I have a family. I have 3 kids, and I really enjoy the outdoors, golf, and that type of thing. And I look at myself as a people person, so I love the networking part of our business. It really is of value to me, and I've been working for Experient for 21 years, and before that I had a hotel background, so that kind of helped me along with the shared economy. So back in 2014, I was at the PCMA Convening Leaders Conference in Chicago, and I had an opportunity to do a session in their learning lounge, which was an open-air learning area with a gentleman named Michael Brous from Airbnb. And Michael, at that time, was in charge of business development for Airbnb. There was also some people from San Francisco Travel who had just started at that time talking with Airbnb about, really becoming a member of the San Francisco Travel and what they could do in terms of regulations and safety, security related to the Airbnb products. So we were on a panel with 3 or 4 people, and in my mind during that time was our clients were interested in Airbnb, but they didn't know much about it. They knew that there were people in their attendance realm that were using Airbnb from the very beginning. So we knew that was happening, and my thought was, in really starting to learn about the shared economy, that it was really something that was here to stay. And that was kind of in the infancy of Uber as well, and I saw how popular Uber was, and that people were really catching on to the fact that Uber was a great option towards taxi cabs. So we did this session, and I couldn't believe, there was probably 100 people in an area set for 40. So people were just everywhere, and there was just such a high level of interest in what Airbnb was about, what the sharing economy was about. And it was interesting at that time, the shared economy was so focused on leisure or your house. And one of the initial stories of the shared economy that's kind of stood the test of time was that, as an example, I have a drill. I own a drill. I maybe used that drill 3 times. The guy 4 doors down from me, he needs a hole in his wall, and he doesn't want to buy a drill. He just needs the hole drilled in his wall. So would that person pay for the person who owns the drill so that he could use it to drill his hole? And it's interesting when you look at your house, and I encourage you while we're going through this session within your own organization to think of it as a house. And what are those assets in your house that are, 1, underutilized, and 2, could be shared? Because that's really the premise of the shared economy, is it's taking underutilized assets, and in many cases these are your most expensive assets. When you look at companies, at the very beginning of the shared economy, eBay is a great example of a place where people could put their assets that they wanted to sell to someone else. Obviously, in many cases, those were underutilized assets. So that's kind of what got it started. And when you look at, and Michael showed a slide during that session of a house. And in that house, there was a lawnmower in the garage. There was, all sorts of different type of items. The car that was in the garage. Those type of things that people might want to utilize. And then with Airbnb, the house itself. So what I started asking the question was, how can the shared economy impact meetings and conferences? Because it's so leisure focused at that time especially. How could we take and find those companies that were on the fringe of this? And so the things that we're going to cover today are, one, we're going to identify some of the players that are in the industry, specifically within travel and within the meetings realm of the business. We're going to try to understand what the value of those products and services can be, because the drivers in the shared economy are, number one, technology. The share, and I'll go deeper into this in another slide later in the presentation, but technology really has driven this phenomenon. It started with eBay, and you wouldn't be able to access people and those products without the technology. The second driver is cost savings, and when Uber is a classic example of cost savings. I was in LA not too long ago, and I was needing to take a taxi from LAX to Anaheim. And I asked the person at the information desk how much the cab was, $130 to Anaheim. And a lot of that's because the tax piece that goes with cabs and the expenses to get medallions and whatnot. The Uber ride was less than $40. So, it was, just a no-brainer type choice. And that's where this cost savings piece comes in. The shared economy, would not click without those two. And then thirdly, the third driver is social. And really, when you talk about social, it's about trust. It's about surveying each party. So if you've ever taken, how many people have taken Uber before? Okay, so everyone's taken Uber, and you know that the minute that you get off of your ride, you're being asked to rate that driver. And you know that when you're getting in the ride, you're seeing their rating. And if their rating's a 4, you might be a little leery, because you're used to seeing ratings of 4.8, 4.9 for Uber drivers. They take it very seriously. And so within the shared economy, and the same goes with Airbnb, you rate the host, they rate you. So that rating becomes something that drives behavior. It drives good behavior. And so those are the real 3 components that make up these companies within the shared economy. So real quick, I'd like before I move on to the next slide and really kind of give you an overview of Airbnb and what we've been doing and our clients have been doing with Airbnb, I'd love for you to just introduce yourself to the person next to you, and maybe just talk about where you're using the shared economy. Are you using it in your personal life? Are you using it professionally at all? What I find is doing these sessions that probably 30% of people even know what it is when I ask people if they are using the shared economy personally or professionally. So let's take a couple minutes and just talk with your neighbor, and then I'll ask if anyone has anyone to share. And some of you may know your neighbor quite well, but again, maybe it's a conversation that you're talking about what you do or don't know about the shared economy.
That's okay. That just makes me feel almost sick. But I was actually trying to think about the shared economy for our members, their technical expertise and kind of understanding. Because we're trying to build big products that are about beyond They're already in it. We're trying to think. Worry about sharing. There's some interesting things going on. I think it's interesting. The citizens like they now do share all the photos that they take of and where they see the data and build knowledge base that understand the migration of space to sort of resolve that. And so we're starting to think about like sharing assets that are assets we know our people are already using and not always the best experience. We've had some hard discussions. Beverage days we did a long time ago our conferences from to the US and how do we have some issues like with the dating and water. So it's not always like you have to be really careful with that.
Okay, we'll give you about 30 more seconds to tie it up.
Very diverse and not everybody
Great. Well, we'll bring it back. And does anyone have anything that they want to share from your conversation? I know I heard Airbnb. I heard Uber Pool. Anything anyone wants to share with regard to those conversations? It seems like pretty much folks. And how many have used, any type of sharing economy company? Personally, okay. So pretty much everybody has. Any company that sticks out in your mind that's not one of the big three, Uber, Airbnb, or Lyft? Debbie.
We talked about the neighborhood listserv and how the
neighborhoods,
the neighbors share information and goods and services.
Yeah, there's a great tool that's called Nextdoor Neighbor. That might be the one that you're talking about. That what's interesting about Nextdoor Neighbor, it was set up kind of similar to an eBay type situation, fits right into the drill mentality. But what happens, and what I've seen, at least in our neighborhood, is people are using it to vent their unhappiness with things happening or going on in the neighborhood. And, that's just part of the social aspect of some of these shared economy tools and companies, because they all have built into them that piece where you can voice your opinion. You look at TripAdvisor as a classic one where, you're not only, giving feedback, but you're telling it like it is. And let's face it, when it comes down to choice, you're trusting more what people say about something than what the company says. And this certainly relates to the younger generations. They've grown up in this world that they don't really trust what a company or a government says, because time and time again, they've been let down. And so it's an interesting situation where people are buying based on another user's recommendation rather than the marketing that the company might do. But we've always shared in this business of events. We have always shared. Whether it was back in the day when you'd ask your convention service manager who's in the hotel before me or who's in after, or you'd ask your destination rep, who's in the city before me, who's in after me. And it's interesting that there's a company out there, and I'm going to talk about the recognized top 5 MICE shared economy companies. I'll touch on each one as we go along, but there's a site called FlyAnotherDay, And FlyAnotherDay is a site where you can go on and see what conflicting festivals, marathons, events that are in different cities. Now, it's in its infancy, it's still growing, but for example, I mean, they even have 25 cities in Asia Pac that are part of it, but you go on there and can really kind of see, what might be going on, during your dates in an easy technology rich way. I've been doing these presentations for, going on 4 years now, specifically at IMEX and other industry events. And one of the things I keep saying when I talk is someday there is going to be a company, and there's probably 2 or 3 people sitting in a room right now talking about it, but there is going to be a company where I can put all of my dates into a portal and where I'm going, kind of things I might need, and others will do the same, and we'll be able to link in a very easy way instead of having to get a phone number from the destination. And let's face it, most people don't want to call, and if they do call, they might get voicemail 10 times from somebody. So how is a company going to come into our space? And FlyAnotherDay is kind of the infancy of what I've always envisioned a company coming in to do, where they're matching in a peer-to-peer economy, and we'll talk about that a little bit more. But we have shared, it's just the philosophy is different. So I want to talk a little bit about Airbnb and how our customers are using Airbnb. So when I had that session with Michael Browse from Airbnb, afterwards he asked to visit with me a little bit, because at that point they really had no idea of events at all. And I mean, it's still a leisure company, but both Airbnb and Uber now have taken and adjusted their product to meet business needs, mostly on the business transient side, the corporate travel side, now being linked with Concur, an expense tool. It shows the validity and the trust that people at a corporate travel level have in these products. But at that point in 2014, Michael had no idea about events and how their product could match up to events. Our driver really was we probably do about 400 citywide conferences a year, and in many of these citywides there gets to be huge compression, and planners are faced with that decision of do I book a hotel 30 minutes away and just let people be on their own for travel, or do I need 2 hotels and maybe a bus route from a 20 or 30 minute away property? Are my people already going on Airbnb to try to find inventory? So we talked a lot that day, and that started the wheels in motion for Airbnb to really start to segment their product, because our point to Airbnb was, we're not interested, our people are not interested in sharing a bedroom in someone's house while they're there. They're more interested in the private inventory, the apartment that's private, the house that's private. And so they work very hard, and you can see on this slide, this is an actual, from an actual link, from an Airbnb link that was placed on a customer's housing page at their request. Then this is Denver. You can see that it's Denver. And you can see how they've included the mapping piece, and also the, the fact that it's not shared inventory. So you're not seeing, these, bedroom in somebody else's house. You're seeing a private place. Now, there's some challenges with this, and I'll say that, when we first announced that we had a deal with Airbnb, there was lots of buzz in the marketplace. Our customers were interested in it, especially those that had trouble with inventory in this tough marketplace. Let's face it. I mean, sometimes our attendees after cutoff are faced with, very high rates if they want to stay, in the convention hotels. Sometimes there's just no space at all. So they were very intrigued by it, and we have had not a tremendous amount, but very active interest in doing a link. So we'll actually get to the point, we have the link, they've tested it, they've looked at it, but then what happens is either someone from the organization, brings up the devil's advocate piece. Maybe it's safety, maybe it's just optics. The same with, maybe putting a 3-star hotel up on your room block. It's not something maybe people want to take responsibility for. So for every 3 links that we develop, we're lucky to have 1 activate. So we've had a number of activations, and it's worked well. And the nice thing is you can get reporting from it. So at least the planners know, who's going there and how much activity is happening after cutoff. And really for us, we know that people are going to Airbnb, at all times during the pre-part of the meeting. But, those that want to track it, they can put a link on from the very beginning. We don't find that much. We find these links and the interest in the links being after cutoff when there's not many rooms. But you can see how easy it is for an attendee to click on the Airbnb link just like it was a hotel and be able to choose their property. Now the difficult part is if you're an organization that has a rebate on your rooms and that type of thing, you're not going to get that with Airbnb, at least not yet. Yes, ma'am.
So the reports are based on if they're going through the link
on your
site and not.
Exactly. So it's not going to track someone who goes just to the open Airbnb link.
And most users, if you're looking for Airbnb, most users already have that app and they've already established a rating for themselves. So you're getting the newbies, not people who are already comfortable and using Airbnb.
Well, they can actually put in this link their information and it will pull back. It will pull it will add to their information. So that's how Airbnb set it up.
My point is that if you use Airbnb, you go directly to it. You don't go to your site. So, and I know that already our younger professionals are using Airbnb and they're beyond going to our site and looking for links. They're planning ahead. So there's some limitations on that.
There definitely is, and that's why for us it was the motivation was after cutoff when it was really difficult for people who would be a new user to find anything that was close, to the convention center district. So it's helped in that. But I was quoted not too long ago by Trade Show Magazine in an article that I said, I can count on one hand. It's probably 2 hands now. I can count the number of activations. So it's not big, but at the same time, you see these cities that are opening more and more inventory downtown. So, that's helping planners as well. But, it's just an option. And that's why we went the distance with this and really, put it up there. So the big question that we had was what could be shared, and what are the kind of things within a meeting that people could share. And so we came up with these things here, and I'm going to talk about a few of them as we go along. Feel free to jump in if you're doing something that's related in any of these, or if you have a new one that's not up on this board that you might feel is something that's relevant to folks in this conversation. I'll start with F&B, which it's interesting when you look at hotels and food costs are increasing significantly, and we all know how expensive it is for lunch, let's say, especially once you add the service charge tax, all that to it. So we're seeing many big hotels doing the meal of the day. And so what that is, you know, if you have 6 lunches going on in the facility, that kitchen could be cooking 6 different meals, ordering 6 different, you know, food products to make up those meals, different prep times, you know, so they might have scheduling with labor to, you know, that are longer for some lunches and shorter for others. So the meal of the day is a great option where if you have those 6 lunches and they all decide to do the same lunch, it really can help lower the price of that meal. And so I encourage you when you're at hotels to ask if they have a meal of the day program that you can get into. Yes, Karen?
How often, it seems like that would be hard to do only because everybody's got their own idea of what their group needs. How often do you see that working? I mean, do people actually, because you're talking 6 different groups and they all pick the meal of the day, it reduces their food costs. What percentage are actually doing that?
We're finding that it's of high interest to our groups.
Mm-hmm.
You know, when they can save $8 or so on a lunch per person, I mean, it's legitimate cost savings.
Yeah. So,
you know, how many ways can you make chicken? How many ways, you know, can you know, pair things up? We're seeing clients now saying, do they have a meal of the day at the beginning during the RFP process?
No, but we actually, in hotels, we actually already, I mean, we'll say if it's a small meeting, you're at a 300-room meeting and you're 50, we'll say, you want to go with the deli buffet?
Yeah.
Because we're already doing it.
Exactly. Yeah. So you're driving that.
We're already asking
Yeah.
the question.
Yeah. Exactly. And it's something that I think people are finding real savings with, not only on the hotel side, but also on the client side. And it's interesting, you know, in our business of events, the shared economy has been driven by suppliers. Let's face it. I mean, for years, suppliers, unbeknownst to planners, are sharing labor. Maybe they're sharing resources. And so I want, again, I'll reference what I said earlier. As we make this discussion, be thinking about your organization and the assets you have. There's a company I'll mention here in a bit, and it goes into you know, meeting space here. It's called Space, and many of these shared economy companies started in Europe and really had traction in Europe, and some of the ones on the top 5 mice are really based in Europe. But Space is a company that takes meeting space. So let's say I have an association and I have 2 boardrooms in my facility. They're not being used maybe twice a month, let's say. I can take and put that inventory on Space and have it available where somebody who's looking for a meeting space that's maybe unique, maybe it's cheaper, they can go on there and book your meeting space. The same is with, they also do, you know, events. So let's say you have a building that has a rooftop area that can be converted for a nice reception. Again, those are great venues for Space to be able to use. And that company's grown. I just did a webinar last week with Julian Jost from Space, and it's amazing just how much inventory they have. And I encourage you, if you have your phone, use your phone during this session to look at some of the companies that we're talking about. So, you know, it will not bother me whatsoever if you're on your phone using your phone. Yes, ma'am.
We've also looked at a number of the WeWork type spaces.
Yes.
And, because they have great evening space and they're doing a lot of receptions and allow you to bring in your own caterers, and that's really been helpful for us when we've got quite a few. We're trying to have differentiated events.
Yeah.
And they have a low overhead because the space is sitting empty.
Yeah.
So that's another way that, and that is like, those spaces are based on the sharing economy, so sometimes they have other companies that are looking to network with the people that are having events there too, so it's an interesting approach. The other thing that you don't have up there that you might want to think about is Venmo, which is I don't know if you're familiar with it, but it's it's the way people actually share tickets, like expenses, and it's like a really huge outside the U.S. now and growing rapidly in the U.S. So if your attendees are like sharing a meal and they need to like split the bill, they use Venmo to like split the bill, and they're just about to get into enterprise and they're starting to take on a few beta companies. So you'll see a lot of these organizations may not be matching up with.
If you have millennial children, it's how they pay.
Yeah. Yeah, and I have their logo on another slide. They're great. Another option in the food and beverage area that's really big, and it's one of the top 5 MICE sharing economy companies. It's called Visi. They have over 25,000 hosts now in Europe, and these are people that will prepare and serve a meal at their house for guests. So, for example, Airbnb a couple years ago did a meeting in Paris. They had an open evening. They used 6,000 of their people ate at Visi locations. So
Can you spell that?
it's Vizeat, and it was founded by Jean-Michel Petit, and he has, it's just kind of changed the options for that open evening. And, he's actually even brought in where you can, get a package that includes a speaker and education and the social piece of it where you're communicating back and forth with the host is similar to Airbnb. If I make my reservation at a restaurant, I'm making my reservation. That's the only contact I have. It might just be electronically. Same with the hotel. But with these shared economy companies, you're having to have, 1 or 2 or more discussions with the host to make sure, that everything is the way that you want. So, you have that enhanced social piece and expectations piece that you discuss. So those are some, food and beverage is a big one. Keep an eye on Visi. I think they'll be moving to the States here soon because it is so practical when many events have that open night. And let's face it, it's not easy sometimes to get into a restaurant. You go to the concierge and they say, okay, you can go at 5 or you can go at 9:30. So, Visit is a great option. Content is another powerful sharing piece. And, we're seeing the MOOCs, the university MOOCs, these massive online education courses that are being made available to really anybody who wants to take advantage of that. So our prediction is that content might become one of the biggest pieces of the shared economy because it's so hard for planners to, kind of reinvent the content every single year. And, where can they pull from maybe even a competitor, or someone that kind of is in their business and pull content over to enhance their meeting without having to really do all the hard work it takes to get the speakers selected, understand what their tracks are, that type of thing. And we really think, and we're seeing, high levels of interest in folks saying, well, if it's a human resource track for X, why can't I bring that human resource track, and customize it a bit for our people? So keep an eye on that one. Another is labor. And this is interesting. Think of it from your organizational asset point of view. Where do you have labor? And when I talk about organizational, it's different than events. So in your association, where do you have labor that could be used by someone else that's skilled labor, whether it's people who are really skilled with working with an AMS system, people that, you've used for registration. There's many different applications. And, I think with the shared economy, what people really have to understand is these companies came about as disruptors. They saw a piece of, daily life, or in our case, something to do with the travel industry or events, and they said, how can I get in there? How can we get into that space? and that's what they're doing. So, you're going to find in labor, one of the top 5 companies, the MICE companies, is called Air Events Global. And this company started as a company, so hospitality students were kind of craving real work, and they weren't able to get it, so, they'd put their names out there, can I be in a part of this a temp company or whatever, and there just wasn't any work for them. So, these couple individuals took that Air Events Global idea, and now they've expanded it. It's not just students, it's, people who just have time on their hands that are available to, work on events. And that's part of what's called the gig economy, which I'll get into in a slide in a bit and talk about some of those companies in the gig economy. But, again, publications, signage, are there ways that people can share some of those resources and assets? And it's similar. I really encourage you as an organization to, take and list your organizational assets and your event assets, and understand, put next to them which are underutilized, and then target those in terms of saying, okay, how can I get something out of that? And it may be monetary, it may not be monetary, it might be in kind. Yes?
So, all of the associations that are represented here have members that are technical experts, and they're all about developing new knowledge. And I've been searching for content examples that are sort of crowdsourced knowledge exchanges. An example that I'm aware of is Spain. They have a program where if you're visiting, you take photos and you see mosquitoes are using it to identify and support the path of the Zika virus. And I'm wondering if since you obviously are studying this, and if you know of any other examples where the content is actually coming from the community for the outcome, rather than pulling the content down for your event.
One great example is there was a organization called Money 2020, and they bought a show called Shop Talk. And at the time, it was kind of 2 different audiences in terms of real estate investors, venture capital folks, that type of thing. So kind of in ways 3 different audiences that now they've brought those audiences together. And the content is not decided by a program committee. It is decided by the crowd, by the people that represent all these very distinct and diverse areas of business. And they've been very, very successful in creating relative content that appeals to the various genres that, have kind of come together with these 2 shows. And it's a good point when you look at that model that, and Emerald Expositions is a real good example of how they're buying shows. I mean, they are aggressively going out and buying shows. Think about who's going to buy you and, what that would mean. And we'll talk about mergers in a little bit, but, what would it mean if someone bought you? Would it be a good thing? Would you embrace it? What if you bought someone else? And so we're seeing where these shows or organizations are starting to say, why couldn't we partner with these folks that, they're doing kind of the same thing, maybe not exactly. How can we partner with them? Can we do it with content? Can we we're seeing, more and more demand for co-location, where an organization, will have their meeting, there'll be a day overlap, and then the other organization will have their meeting. So very powerful in that respect. So transportation's the last one I'll touch on here. We all know how expensive it is to, provide transportation. So, Uber for business events is a good option. Lots of groups are going in and saying, okay, I want a code that I can give my staff, that they just put that code in, and then all the expenses go right to, a master folio. They can also give it to their VIPs instead of maybe contracting, transportation. Or they can use it as a reward for people and say, here's that code, go ahead and use it. And then they know exactly, and so in some cases, they'll put a limit on it. They'll say, we'll do $5,000 on this code. When we get to that point, they'll alert people, that code's, not available. But it's something that, is interesting. There's a company called Share the Bus that started with a church bus, and a church that, again, they sat and they said, what are our assets? And they said, we have this bus and we use it twice a year. So Share the Bus is a technology site where you can go in and say, I need a bus for this, these dates. And then someone who has a bus can link with you and you can negotiate pricing, to utilize that bus. Now, from a trust standpoint, these sites and these companies, one of the things they work really hard on is insurance.
Yeah.
Visi has a $2 million plus policy. Uber, Airbnb, their hosts are protected by umbrella type policies, Share the Bus, that type of thing. So, but it is certainly something to be aware of and a concern for people when they're using the shared economy. But, you get to the point with Uber, out of, hundreds of millions of rides, something happens, it's the first thing on the news. Hotel, millions of room nights, things are going to happen, but it's that level of trust you have as an individual, the level of trust you have as an organization, that's going to drive whether you use it or not. But transportation is one. I'm also seeing, lots of flight type, shared space on private jets. And let's face it, if any of us have, been traveling, it'd be nice to go private. And there's some of these companies out there now that, you pay. A friend of mine's using one in Florida. He paid like $9,000, kind of a, initiation fee, and then just buys hours on the flight. And usually they're going out of smaller airports, and it's an option I think that you're going to see more and more of. And whether it's Wheels Up or NetJets, they're making it more and more available and price, more realistic in terms of price for maybe an upper end consumer who's, maybe one of your VIPs or people who are, flying first class anymore. It might be, even cheaper to do that. And all you have to do is watch a golf tournament to see how many of these guys have Wheels Up and NetJets and all this stuff on their shirts. So this is this slide. It's an interesting slide in that I started this slide 3 years ago, and at that time there was maybe a fifth of it of logos. But these are all companies that play in the travel or hospitality or meeting space. And I expect by the end of this year, I'll fill the left-hand part of this slide up. But you can see how, and you got your WeWork that's up there. I mean, you can see how many of these companies that are coming out. And the one thing about the shared economy, the reason why it's taken off so quickly, and you see Uber making billions of dollars in a matter of 3 or 4 years, is because it's so easy to get into the space. It's not difficult and it's not expensive to, create a website, to, get the technology right. And then, and one funny one there, who's heard of BlaBlaCar? I just have to tell this story. You've heard of BlaBlaCar? Which are you? Have you taken it before, or you've just heard of it?
My coworker was talking about
Okay.
Using it for travel.
Yeah. So BlaBlaCar, it's predominantly right now in Europe. I know it'll get here, but it's used for rides over 300 miles. And if I'm going to Paris, I'll go on BlaBlaCar and I'll say I want to go to Paris on this day. And then the difference here is they're going to match you with someone who's driving there. that driver has a rating of whether they talk a lot during the drive. And then you, as a user, have a rating of whether you talk a lot. So you try to match yourself with the person, if you talk a lot, then you're probably going to go with someone who talks a lot. If you don't, so you're able to match of who you want to ride with. But kind of an interesting...
What is Piggy Bee?
Piggy Bee. You know what? Do me a favor. Look it up on your phone real quick. Look it up on your phone real quick. Okay, so this is another question I want you to talk for a couple minutes about. Is there current technology that you're aware of outside of, and another one of the top 5 mice companies called ShowSlice, and ShowSlice was a UK company that Damien Araki, he founded it. He was actually a labor guy in production, and he founded the company. And what they do is they go out to events and try to, and again, they're not the technology, what I was talking about earlier, where I would put they're going to an event and saying, would you share your setup with another group? And they're doing it in hotels, they're doing it in outside festivals, predominantly in the UK, but they have plans to come into the US. So just for maybe a minute or two, just talk with your neighbor at your table about, are you aware of anything with regard to technology driving some of this? And do you buy into that thought process that I have, that there's going to be somebody that comes up that's going to change the face of events because of technology and the ability to make it easy to communicate on a peer-to-peer basis? So we'll let you have a minute or so to chat about it. Yeah, okay.
But you're saving on the shipping and handling fee.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you want to get a laptop,
Yeah, there's another one called Ship, SHYP, and that's shipping to a local. And then having that, so someone from the association, that lives where the event is, you ship to them and then they bring it over.
Wow.
So that's, yeah, exactly. And also the fact that, it may not be such an easy way to get lost within a big facility's, shipping and receiving area.
Yeah, Piggy Bee. Yeah, for you in Boston, man. Well, not only that, but I wonder all these disruptors, how long will it be before the security comes into play and they say, nope, can't come into the building, has to go here, systems, because they're losing revenue, and, I think there will be some roadblocks. I personally, but I think they'll find a way to block some of it, personally. Security? Oh, yeah. Yeah, like I'd like to get completely PeertoPeer from Salt Lake to the East Coast, give to my clients, but you can't ship because of the whole, so I'm always looking, because he's super stressed and it becomes normal cases in their car all the way back, really technology. Yeah, they're always working with him. Yeah.
So what do you think? Do you buy into the fact that, you would, use this type of thing? That you would join the peer-to-peer economy and really, use a tool that would allow you to connect to somebody that, has some of the same kind of interests or resources, or or maybe they're not even with your group at all, but it's just somebody who's in that city at the same time. I see some nodding. Well, and that's really what makes up this peer-to-peer economy. And, in the past, as we discussed, it was, it's not the easiest thing to do. Some groups don't want you to know that they're in town. Some groups have confidentiality, but again, they don't have to be part of the platform. But with peer-to-peer, there's so many different things that are part of our arsenals that could be shared. And so it's just one of those things where I encourage you to think about that. And when you're at meetings like this, when you're talking to somebody, don't be afraid to ask the question, what resources do you have that are underutilized? Because it might spark a conversation where you really can start to share. And this is a powerful part of the shared economy, is this peer-to-peer approach. And you can see, I know they're kind of small, but you can see, from lending to, different pieces that you might never even think of. I mean, an organization that has huge reserves, could they lend money to another organization? Could they fund something from their reserves? Scary, for sure, but again, knowing what those assets are and how you can use them can be pretty powerful. So again, I think the group here thinks that this is something that could take place and probably is in certain ways, but if there's technology tools driving it, it could be very powerful. So here are some of the event disruptors in play today, and what I did was tried to bucket these so that you had a little bit of sense of where they play. And so I'm just going to take a couple of these and highlight in each bucket. Hotel Tonight and Accommodations is a real powerful site, and it is one that if you want a room for tonight, you can go there and find a room for tonight at a discount that you probably wouldn't find on Travelocity, Expedia, those type of wholesale OTA sites. We talked about Spacebase. Meeting Brokers is another one. They're one of the top 5 MICE companies out there, and they're actually combining a RFP product with this search for unique venues. So that's a company to keep an eye on. Bisley is another one that's playing in this space, but you can see in that unique meeting venue space, now it's starting to get red ocean. At first it was blue ocean. You had Spacebase, you had Bisley's a new one into the game. Meeting Broker's been around a while, but both Meeting Broker, Spacebase are European-based companies now in the U.S. But it's starting to get red ocean. From a temp staffing situation, who's heard of Fiverr? Anyone heard of Fiverr? So see the one there, Fiverr? Is it hard to see that slide? Sorry. So Fiverr, it's under miscellaneous helpers. It's under temporary staffing. It's number 2. It's 5 with 2 R's. It is a site where you can hire a marketing contractor. It's a gig economy site that you pay $5 and they can help do a logo for you. They can do a business card. They can, do some graphic work. And the whole thing is that their hope is if you hire them on a Fiverr project, that you might hire them, on a more than Fiverr project. But it's a great way if you have something really last minute related to the conference that's marketing driven, that you can find people that are professionals that are out there. Gig Masters, and again, Fiverr, Gig Masters, Etsy, Craigslist, those are all part of the gig economy. It's really taken off. I'll show you a slide here in a minute of some of the numbers around that. But Gig Masters are professionals for hire. So you're actually hiring someone with a certain skill, and there's a variety and diverse amount of skills out there. And the reality is there are more independent contractors. I think it's up to 55 million in this company or in this country right now, and that's predicted to continue to grow, where people are, they're an independent contractor and they're hiring themselves out. Gig Masters is a good place to find those specialties and be able to search for it. Who's heard of FON? FON, F-O-N, it's one of the miscellaneous there. FON is where I take my my secure internet connection that I have, and I go out onto FON, I become a member, I load my site in, and then anywhere I'm traveling in the world, I can access a secure internet site from someone else that's a member of FON. So very secure, millions of members right now. I mean, it's very, very popular. Translate.com, these companies are really working with your smartphone. I think you're going to start to see, more and more ability for translation just to happen on your cell phone. Obviously, Spotify. I talked about Share the Bus up in transportation. Flight Car. This is an interesting one where you drive your car to the airport, you drop it off at the Flight Car location, they take you to the airport, then they rent your car to someone else for the time that you're gone, okay? And then what's the beauty of it, not only do you have free parking, but you get paid a portion of that rental, but then they also have your car washed and gassed up when you come back. So it's not in a lot of locations yet, but it's certainly an interesting one. And there's also one here called Seataroo, which Seataroo is where if I have an aisle seat and I don't mind sitting in the middle, I can go on Seataroo, and if there's someone else on that plane that's on Seataroo, they can actually buy my aisle seat and I'll sit in their seat. So kind of interesting. I talked about Visi. Uber Eats is great for meetings, right? I mean, how nice is it to be able to order for your staff from Uber Eats from a nice restaurant to have it brought so that you're not having to send somebody out to go get a bunch of food. It's just there. Feastly is good for groups and meetings because it's pop-up group dinners, lunches, that type of thing. And it's a great site where you go on, and if you have a small group that you want to, and Feastly's over in food and beverage, the second one down. I'm sorry that this came out so bad. And if you want, I have this in a nice PDF. I can send it if you give me your business card after. Then I'll mention Rent the Runway. People, I'm sure people have used Rent the Runway here. It was founded by a couple of university students who, they had a lot of formals to go to and whatnot, and so they started this company where you can rent a dress. Now they've moved into kind of the second generation of sharing, where they're actually buying new dresses at discount and making them part of their inventory. So it's going to that next level of shared economy companies.
She was a speaker here last year.
Yeah, well, she was. Okay, yeah, she's dynamite. And, there's also, if you go to Indianapolis, they have Blue Indy car sharing. So you can actually share a electric car there and use it kind of like a bike, but it's for the bike sharing that goes on in cities, but it's actually a car. So these are the top disruptors of 2017. And this is from CNBC. So, you kind of look at this, and I'm going to show you a couple slides on investments in Airbnb and in Uber, so you can kind of see they're really the two behemoths here. But the difference in investment in these companies by people versus traditional companies is pretty compelling. But you kind of see these different companies here. I mean, SurveyMonkey. What a great, disruptor that's been to the survey business, and it's really taken it to a new level. And I think there's a lot of groups that they're just using SurveyMonkey. So these are disruptors, not necessarily shared economy, but disruptors. And I did put them all up here. So you've got, this is the 21 through 40. There's some familiar names here, but there's not so familiar names here. And this is the thing where it is very easy to get into this space and disrupt it. It's picking that one thing that you're going, man, I hated that. How can we make it better? And, you know, these are some smart people doing it for sure. If you want to learn more about this, this book, No Ordinary Disruption, by Richard Dobbs, James Manica, and Jonathan Wetzel, is an excellent book because it talks about the 4 global trends here and issues. The first being the rise of emerging markets, and that's happening all over the world. The accelerated impact of technology on market competition. Okay, you can actually compete with the big guys because of the technology. The aging world population, and then the accelerated flow of trade, capital, people, and data. So really good book if you're looking to learn more about, you know, really what the future is. Because I will say this, and I know I've been quoted many times, this is here to stay. I mean, if you're not embracing it, learning about it, you're missing opportunities to save money and to provide your members, your stakeholders with experiences that they're intrigued by, that they want to be involved with. So this is, you know, the trust and security piece is big within this space, and it really is the dividing line sometimes between whether a company is going to say, yes, we'll do that, or no, we won't. And you've seen now the trust Airbnb and Uber have built with their clientele, so much so that organizations are now saying, you know what, it's okay to use Uber and we'll reimburse you for it. It's okay to use Airbnb and we'll reimburse you for it. And now these companies are going to the next level and partnering with Concur, expense-related people. They're actually a corporate travel person for big companies negotiating pricing with them. So it is real, but you know, the safety piece of it is something that still I think people have to get by.
It's so funny though, because I understand safety and security, I really truly do. But before all this existed, we got in cabs.
Yeah.
And we took our life in our hands on I-95 going to the airport. And I'm thinking, but because knowledge is power, we all know too much. And I think it's become an issue, but it really isn't an issue. There'll be the one-offs that something will happen.
But that's what you hear about, right? It's what the media brings to the surface. And so, you know, it's you know, it all is a ratio. I mean, you know, if you're going to have 5 things a year that happen and you have 400 million rides, you know, the odds are, you know, pretty much in the consumer's favor, but it's a dividing line between the 50% of the people who've used the sharing economy and the 50% who haven't. Yes.
Well, I think the risk is always there. It's just greater transparency around it.
Yes.
So it does become an issue for us in terms of our community comes to us for support and security, and so it's, you know, extending our brand to these brands just makes it a little bit more challenging.
Yeah.
You know, because associations are all about trust, and
That's
that's one of
it.
the reasons why people want to be a member is they want to trust that they're with their peers, and there's a little bit of common shared ethics. So, and I think with the new way of creating together and sharing things together, that people don't necessarily feel like everybody has the same ethics as they do. So I think that's an important component of this. So being able to even talk about, I was really impressed. I'm sorry, I know I forgot your name from ACS, but you were talking about just you set trust in the room when we opened up here's where the emergency exit is. So some of it's about how you manage expectations with your publics about what's risky, if they feel uncomfortable with a vendor. And I think that's true about, you know, all of our responsibility when we provide services to our
Mhm.
customers. So I wanted to recommend a tool that wasn't up in the list. That's a disruptor that we use all the time called Woofoo. It's WUFOO, and it's similar to SurveyMonkey in that it's like really easy to create secure forms where you're
Mhm.
sharing information, and it organizes it into like everything that's submitted could go into a PDF and it goes into Excel spreadsheet. And every day we're like creating Woofoo forms for all of the people that we work with, because we don't want people to email stuff to us. We want it to be organized and we want it to be secure. And we have to get a lot of
Yeah.
secure information from our members, such as people don't want to send in us credit card information,
Yeah.
but they can put it in the PDF and then put it
Mhm.
in Woofoo and it's secure. So and it's really inexpensive. Like we have very little money for an account for our department.
Mhm.
And like every day we got 3 or 4 new Woofoo forms that we're using. So it's really started changing our productivity.
That's great.
Woo, WUFOO, woofoo.com.
And
Super.
there's another
Thanks
one
for that.
called Jotform that I use for a nonprofit that I'm involved with, and it's very similar to
Yeah.
Woo.
It's, and again, the first disruptor was DocuSign, right?
Yeah.
And now people are saying, well, what about this? What about that? And it just shows you how quick. But thanks for that. From a trust standpoint, that I think is the goal of these companies, is to build trust quickly with people, to build loyalty. I think you'll start to see, loyalty programs, more emphasis in, really kind of getting those raving fans together to be the Pied Piper for others. Interestingly enough, and one I will say, there's a great book out there. Debbie Wasco wrote "Unlocking the Sharing Economy." It's a really good book where she is, talking about certifications of these companies, and how you can, could we in this world have these companies certified so that from a trust and a safety, security, that type of issue, that they've been vetted and that they've achieved some level of distinction amongst maybe a peer that started last night in somebody's basement. This is interesting, and when I saw this slide, and this information, not the slide, I put the information on the slide, but I just thought people made more money on these type of things. But this is the average in the gig economy, because again, ride sharing is, deemed to be part of the gig economy. People aren't making that much money, a month on this. So, it just kind of surprised me, and I just wanted to bring it up that, we kind of think that Uber driver that's taken us is, it's a whole nother career for them, but it truly is not, I think, in most respects. It's a situation where people are supplementing their income. If they're being a Uber driver, they're trying to pay their car payment, but yet they're putting, hundreds and hundreds of miles on it to do it. It's just supplemental. So it was an interesting slide for me. And then this is what I was talking about with the gig economy. I know this is a little bit tough to see, but the on the right is really where I was surprised. And these crowdfunding, it's different than crowdsourcing. Crowdsourcing is more on the content side. Crowdfunding, 60% of the revenue that people achieve through crowdfunding come from an acquaintance or family. Very low, if it's 28%, if you don't know the people and you just put it out there. So still, something's better than nothing, but if you're getting your crowdfunding requests out to people and again, for an association, foundations, different type of initiatives, CSR type asks might be a great option to be able to reach those people that really know you. Because let's face it, at the annual meeting, many associations are only getting a percentage of their membership that are coming to the annual meeting. How many would donate to the CSR initiative through a crowdfunding mechanism? that don't come to the annual meeting, that aren't there to see that charity that's being supported. And CSR is another good thing to share with events. So, if, for instance, the fun run today, if we would have found out who else was in town, we could have shared that fun run with another group who didn't have a fun run, didn't want to really mess with it, but were willing to pay to be at that fun run, especially know that it goes to charity. So don't overlook the CSR, the power of those projects, especially when they're benefiting local organizations that you can engage with other people. And hey, what a great way to meet some new people if you bring them in. But 27%, that's pretty consistent with the fact that 73% of the people have never heard of the sharing economy. And I think it's, this data is a couple years old. Another place I would really recommend, if you're interested in this, you've heard of Rachel Bostrom. She's has a company called Collaborative Consumption. And it's a great website to see what's going on in this world of sharing. And a lot of people actually refer to this peer-to-peer economy, gig economy, sharing economy, all as collaborative consumption. So if you're really interested in it, she does a real nice job. She spoke at PCMA last year as well.
What's her last name?
Bostrom, Bostrom. And this is actually, this slide is from their website, and you can see on this slide, it really goes into what I was talking about before. These drivers of the shared economy, technology, leading the way, the consumption of products, the demand. Okay, I need this, but do I need it in the traditional way? I need a ride from LAX to Anaheim, but do I need it in a cab or a shuttle bus? Could I consume it in a different way? The finance piece, the costs. I'm not going to use Uber if it's more expensive than a cab. I'm going to use the cheapest thing, right? I mean, that's how we're dialed in these days, is we want high quality as cheap as possible. We want luxury and not necessarily have to pay for luxury. We want convenience at a low price. And so those are the things that come into it. And then obviously education's a big part of it, to make sure that people in your organizations know that, it's okay to share. I mean, if you have an asset and you want to share it and you're going to make money or you're going to have a non-monetary gain, it's okay. And then these are those 4 drivers. And the one that I didn't touch on purposely at the beginning was this environmental awareness. And this is a situation where many people value the shared economy because it saves on, fuel. It helps the environment. There's not as many, as much building going on when you're sharing assets. These assets aren't going, and I'll just give an example. I mean, who knows where the airplane graveyard is? Does anyone know where that's at? Yep, you're right. It's in Tucson. So here are all these airplanes that are sitting there in Arizona because they aren't going to rust there, doing a bunch of nothing. And, is that good or bad for the environment? I don't know. But this whole concept of environmental awareness is a big driver for the shared economy.
Yeah.
These are really the 5 rational benefits for your organization. So if you're trying to instill a mindset of a shared economy approach, these are benefits that you can put up to your, senior leaders and say, okay, these are the things that, could make a difference for us. And then lastly, let's just try it. Let's experiment with it, kind of lean canvas mentality. Let's just see if it works. And then I'm going to go through these slides really quick, but this gives you Airbnb's merger and acquisition since I think they started. And this is from Crunchbase, which is a great site, by the way, to kind of get a feel for where investors are investing, the value of companies, if it's private, public, etc. But you can see, quite a few transactions here and acquisitions. They have money. This is the amount of investors, and I'll show you a slide from Marriott and the that looks here on their acquisitions as well. But look at and these are major investors. This is not like me investing, 2 things of stock. This is people who are investing serious money that are being tracked by Crunchbase. But look at Uber, 14, all these big ones. They tend to, the investors invest in these companies, the same type of investors. And then for Uber, look at the investors here. Kind of the same thing that you're looking at, where venture capitalists, they like these companies and they are investing billions into this marketplace. And then the interesting piece is legacy companies are buying, and this was Cvent investors. They are bought by Vista Marketing, but you can see how much different this investment portfolio looks than the Airbnb and the Uber portfolio. And then these are Marriott's acquisitions. So, this is 2 decades. Now, let's face it, their last investment was a pretty big one, right? But look at the activity of Airbnb in relation to this in just a few years. You're going to see more of that. I have a sneaking suspicion Uber is going to really kind of take off next year in terms of, buying companies. They could buy Share the Bus. Who knows? Those are kind of things I know I think about. And the interesting part of it, when you look at in the hospitality space, mergers and acquisitions, there's been 32 acquisitions in the hospitality business since 2015. So I think mergers and acquisitions are going to be top of mind, for people. And I always have fun kind of thinking who's going to buy who. And if we had time, I'd go through a little exercise where, we kind of in our mind say, who's going to buy, Hyatt, and who might buy, IHG, and who might buy Omni, and who, it's just fascinating because it's all under wraps until it's announced. And I'm a company, our company was acquired by Maritz Global Events over 5 years ago now, and it's fascinating that a lot of times you don't see it coming. So I'd like to just think about it because I know it's going to happen. So that is me, and that's my email if you want to reach out to me, and my Twitter. And I want to remind you to also do the session survey. And I think we have a time for a couple questions if you haven't asked them already. But anyone? Well, I've sure enjoyed this time with you all, and embrace it because it's not going away. Thank you.